All right. Let me ask you a simple question. Which one of these pictures is a picture of New York? If I were to say, show me a picture of New York, which one would you point to if you had to choose one? What's a picture of New York? If you had to choose one, point your hand out. Everybody do their pointers. Which one's a picture of New York? If you had to pick one, I think if you know anything of geography, they're both showing. Okay, so who's over here? Everybody over here, put your hand up. Okay, who's over here? Looks about 50-50. Maybe this one wins out. The fact is, both of these are a picture of New York, but it's a matter of perspective. Over here we have the street level view, and over here we have the sky level view, or whatever you might want to call it. I'll call it the sky level. It's good alliteration. So we have the street level on this side. You can see the Times Square, the taxi cabs, and that was moved from our cafe, if you remember that picture. I've seen that somewhere. This would be the sky level, and that's what you would see if you happen to be in a helicopter or something like that. And so, yeah, they're both pictures of New York, and we're starting a new series tonight called Big Picture. And over the next few weeks, we're taking some time to talk about our perspective. I want to evaluate a lot of things from a sky level view in our life. See, the fact is, both of these perspectives are important. The street level view is important. On a street level view, you have to watch where you're going. Maybe the next 20 feet. You don't want to run into lampposts. Who's ever run into something when they're walking, they weren't paying attention? Anybody? It's a little embarrassing. Can hurt. You want to be careful that you don't run into somebody, or you don't walk out on the street and accidentally get run over by a taxi. So street level vision is important. I'm not going to say it's not important. It is. We have to have that. But also important is sky level vision. Now, from here you can't see much, but you can see a big idea of what New York looks like. And another picture of a sky level would be maybe a map. You think about a map, it shows you where you're going. See, on the street level, success is, not getting hit by a car, not running into something. And in a real sense, it's making it through the day, making it through the week. Sometimes that's where we're looking at. Man, if I can just make it to the end of this day. You ever had a day like that where you had a lot of tests, quizzes, a lot of stuff going on? Like, just let me get through the day. Right? Just want to get to the end. Or just want to get through the week. Just get to Friday. Just get to the weekend. And then I can breathe. I can live. Sometimes we live like that. That's street level view. I just got to get through the moment. I got to get through this thing that I'm facing. I want to focus on playing hard. If you're playing sports, maybe you're in the next game. I'm just focusing on the next game I'm preparing for. And so you're in the season and you're just thinking about that next game and your opponent who you're facing, and then it's the next one and the next one. And that's kind of how your view is. And that's okay. And that's fine. Sometimes it's so street level that we're just thinking about the next time. And I don't know, you guys never do this, but some people like to check their phones because little beeps go off on their phone and little sounds happen, and then that means something's happening in the cyber world and I need to check on it. And so you go from beep to beep and whatever, and notification and whatever, and that's street level. You get excited. I got 2 new followers. Yeah, I'm up to 250. All right, that means something, right? No, 300 means something. What are you thinking? So that's street level view, street level living. Maybe we think, I just want to make sure I have enough underwear in the drawer. That's all I really care about. I don't want to run out of underwear. Do you ever run out of underwear? That's a bad day. You got to turn it inside out. You ever done that before? Done that. Okay, not cool. Run out of socks. And I'm not trying to point fingers, but sometimes that happens. I love you, Cassie. You're a great wife. So sometimes that will happen. But I could do my own laundry. I really could. So anyway, that happens sometimes, and that's just thinking about. Oh, you're awesome.
Never in my presence have worn your underwear inside out.
No, that was on like a mission trip or something. Yeah, that didn't happen on a mission trip. Plenty of underwear. Sometimes not so much on socks, but that's my fault too. All right, so here's what I want to think about. Street level is okay. Sometimes you got to go through the street level. Sometimes you got to just think about that test that you got. You got to focus on it. There's no way you can live your whole life at a sky level view. You can't. But I want to take the next season of time together. So the next few weeks, maybe the next couple months, looking at sky level or big picture views of our life and of various things that affect our life. Is that cool? So that's what we're going to do in this series. I want us to kind of zoom out of just the day-to-day view of what we do. And so that's what we're going to attempt to do tonight. So the big picture is about where am I going? It's about why am I traveling this direction to start with. On a street level, you could just be walking along, make sure you don't run into things. But the bigger question is, why am I even going this direction anyways? Okay, I didn't run into a car. Okay, I didn't trip. But should I even be walking on this street at all? Where do I want to end up? Will this road take me there? Those are some big picture questions. And a lot of times, we don't function in the big picture. Sometimes that's something that we cast off to the side and we miss the big picture. Tonight I want to look at 3 possible reasons why we miss the big picture. Okay, so if you're taking notes, you're writing things down, which I encourage you to do. These are 3 things why we miss the big picture. Pretty straightforward. So number 1, here it is. Why do we miss the big picture? Why do we get caught up in the street level and sometimes miss the bigger questions of life? Number 1, we are nearsighted. We're nearsighted, maybe even blind. Number 1, we're nearsighted and maybe even blind. The technical word for nearsightedness, anybody know what that is? Anybody smart person in here? What's the word for nearsightedness, the scientific?
I don't know what that is, I just know what nearsighted is.
He knows what it is. We'll start somewhere, okay? Oh, so Ryan, you're nearsighted? So you got the glasses to correct that. What is nearsightedness? In case someone doesn't know here, someone may not know.
It's when things up close are clear and things farther away become like darkness.
Okay, so exactly. So up close, you can see. Far away, you can't see. If you're in England, you would call that short-sighted. They have a different word for it. They call it short-sightedness in England. USA calls it nearsighted, but the technical word is myopia. Anybody know that? Heard of that? No? Probably not. Now you have. Myopia comes from Greek words which combine to mean basically to shut your eye. So you can't see, especially far away, you can't see, you just see what's right here. And we all have a limited vantage point. Here's the reality. All of us are at some level nearsighted because none of us can see down into the future forever, right? I mean, I'm not really into the sorcery thing because that's kind of not Christian and all that. But the crystal ball, you look at the crystal ball, ooh, I can see your future. That's not, that's not on our team. But none of us have a crystal ball, a Christian crystal ball, where we can see into the future and we don't have that. We're limited in our perspective. So if I were to say, hey, what's your life going to look like, Sam, in 4 years? You could guess. He'd be like, I'm going to be sitting in this chair for 4 years. Dude, I'm going to be sitting right here. You're like, nah, man. I'll be president of the United States. No, that's not going to happen either. You can guess and you can take good guesses or bad guesses, but none of us know exactly into the future. We have a limited vantage point. We can only see so far ahead. The Bible says this in 1 Corinthians 13:12 that we see through a glass darkly, or another translation, we see through a mirror dimly. So that when we see in life, we don't see everything as clear. Like when you get out of the shower in the bathroom and it's all foggy, unless you take cold showers and that doesn't happen. But for me, it's all foggy in there. And you're like, I want to look in the mirror. You swipe it away and you can see for a second, but then it gets foggy again. You ever have that happen? Probably so, right? And that's kind of the thing. We're looking, we can kind of see ourselves, we can see part of it, but we don't see like it's very clear. And that's what the Bible says our life is like that. We see through a glass, or we see in a mirror darkly. We can kind of see a reflection, we can kind of see things, but we don't see as clear as God does. There's a phrase that people use, they say that hindsight is what? 20/20. Hindsight is 20/20. What does that mean? Anybody know what that phrase means? Emily? Good to see you. High five. Hindsight is 20/20. What does that mean? When you look backward, it's pretty clear. Looking forward, it's not. Here, let me give you an example of that. Who watched the Redskins game? Right? The whole RG3 injury thing. Anybody know about that? So now all the commentators are like, hey, they should have pulled him out of the game. See how dumb Shanahan is? He left him in the game, right? So everybody looks back because they lost. Hindsight is 20/20. Say, stupid, man. Duh, they should have played Kirk Cousins, pulled him out of the game when he started limping, and then, we would have been in the next game this week. And everybody can speculate, but in the moment, you don't know. You know, in the moment when they're making that decision, it seems like, hey, we're still winning 14-13. Maybe we can pull this out. We can't see the future. And so when we look back, we can see some things. We can seem like experts, but when we look forward, sometimes we don't really know, and we're taking a guess. And you can't live your life looking back. You can learn from the past, but you can't live constantly looking back. You have to look forward, because that's the direction you're going. And so nobody sees everything except for God. And this is interesting. I looked up this phrase, the eyes of the Lord. This is in the Bible, the phrase, the eyes of the Lord. This is in, the NIV translates it out 88 different times where it says this in the Bible. God is personified all the time as he has eyes. I mean, I don't know if God literally has eyes because he's God, he doesn't need eyes. But as human beings, we think, all right, God has eyes because he can see. He sees everything. And so the eyes of the Lord, what does that mean? What does it mean that God has eyes? And this is what two big realities that pop out there. That one, that God does see everything. Nothing escapes his notice. This means that God stands outside of time. He's not limited like we are within our ability to only see a little bit backwards and not see much forward and just see right now. God sees everything. He sees the big picture. If anybody sees the big picture, God does. Okay, so he knows your past. He knows your present. Let's make it just personal to you. He knows your future. And not only does he know yours, he knows every other person that ever lives or ever will live. He knows what's going to happen in history. He knows everything that did happen. He knows everything that is happening now and everything that will happen. He stands outside of that. It's really amazing when you think about the omniscience, the knowingness of God, how much he knows. It's amazing. And then compare ourselves in response to that. If you've ever read the book of Job, God does that at the end of that, where he compares his knowledge to Job's, and he says, Job, what do you really know, man? You've been speculating in this book for 30-some chapters here. Now, really, do you know as much as me? You can talk and talk and talk, but I'm the one that sees everything. And in that story, it is true that Job doesn't have the perspective of God. God's seeing what's going on in Job's life at a greater way than Job is. And Job just sees his suffering, but God is seeing what's really going on behind that and his plan at work. And so God has a perspective that is above ours. And it's nothing escapes his notice. Number two, not only that, but God has a particular perspective. Because he sees everything, he sees things differently. Because he sees everything, he sees it different than we do. When you're facing something that's troubling in your life, you may get really mad. You get frustrated about it. And maybe that's just a natural reaction. But God may see it totally different. Maybe he brought that in your life for a reason. Because he's wanting to work in you something more important later on. These are things that we sometimes can't see, and sometimes we don't want to see. Because we're just concentrating on what's happening right now, and it's bothering us. But see, God has a different perspective. He sees things different than we see them. This shows up, this phrase, the eyes of the Lord, like I mentioned, it shows up often talking about God's perspective on different people's lives. So when people live their life, they look at themselves and say, yeah, I'm doing a pretty good job. Often it's talking about the kings of Israel. We've already studied them. I'm not going to go back into that. But let me just give you one example. Ahab. Maybe some of you have heard of this guy. 1 Kings 16:30 says, Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. Now, without going into the whole story of Ahab actually thought he's a pretty cool guy. He thought his life was going great. But the fact that in his eyes that he was doing great is not the same as in God's eyes. So God had a different perspective on Ahab than Ahab had on Ahab. God saw his life differently. And Jesus brings this up in the New Testament. Luke 16:15, he said to them, you are the ones, speaking to the Pharisees, who justify yourselves in the eyes of men. See, these even spiritual people, spiritual leaders, they try to get other people to have the right perspective and think they're awesome and all this stuff. We can do that. We want people to like us. But this is what it says. He goes on, but God knows your hearts. What is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight. God has a different perspective. And even while sometimes we think we're doing great, we think life's okay, we may not sense any need for God. Maybe we believe in God, but we're like, man, I'm doing all right. You may be sitting here tonight thinking, honestly, I don't really see my big problems or whatever. I'm doing pretty much good. I'm here, not really needing much from this sermon, Pastor Sheldon. I'm doing okay. Well, the truth is, you may not see it, but God sees what your needs are, even if you can't even sense them. All throughout the Bible, people thought, I'm doing awesome. And God has a different perspective. He says, you know what? I see your needs. I see what you need. And so God has this perspective. And that's what I want us to try to lean into as we dig into this series. What is God's perspective? What is His view of my life? Since God sees everything and I see just a little bit, could I maybe open myself up to His perspective? Could I be open more to what God sees in my life than just what I see? We all vary in our nearsightedness. It seems that some people have greater vision and awareness, anticipation of the future, and others seem to be functionally blind toward their life. We all vary, but we're all nearsighted to some degree. Proverbs 27:12 says this, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it. So, while none of us knows as much as God, at the same time, there are people who look into the future a little bit and look at their life and say, you know what? I need to do something about this. I need to listen to God right here. I need to take refuge over here. And there's others that just say, you know what? Whatever. And they just keep going. So even while we can't see everything, we can see some things that God will reveal to us and show us. And so that's kind of where we want to go. So why do we not see the big picture? Number one, we're all nearsighted. And so we all have that tendency not to see. But God can open our eyes. God can reveal. God can show us things if we allow Him to do that. Number two, why do we not see the big picture sometimes? Number two, something is blocking the view. Something is blocking the view. A few years ago, we went to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Who's been to that? Anyone? It's in New York City. Yes, TV. It's a better way to do it, I'll just tell you. But if you've never gone, maybe you want to do it once. So we went, stayed Friday night in a hotel, kind of far out of the city, because hotels in the city are kind of expensive. So we stayed far out, drove in probably, 4 in the morning? It was early in the morning. We drove in, found a place to park, got up to the street, had our little kids. Lily was probably, 1 or, stroller, I think, just a baby. And we were there ready for it way early. At first, there was not very many people. Then all of a sudden, it just seemed like more people, to the point where, true story, Dane had to go to the bathroom. Yeah, and I honestly could not get from here to about where that door is, which was a Starbucks, because there's so many people. There was no possible way for me to walk with my son to the bathroom, so we found a little drain. I just let him pee in the drain, so it's pretty cool. That's a true story. So that's the cool thing about sons. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is, as the parade began, I realized we came here for my kids, I think, and for my wife. She wanted to see it too. And I kind of did. But mostly for the kids, because they wanted to see Buzz Lightyear, and they wanted to see all these floats and stuff. But where we were standing, there's no way they were going to be able to actually see the parade. Because there's all of this crowd, all of these people, all this stuff, and we're like, man, this is a problem. So I have to hoist up my kids, I have to hoist them up on my shoulders, and the only way they're going to see is to rise up above what's blocking them. If we were just said, all right, you're on your own, son, Dane, 3-year-old, just see Buzz Lightyear if you can. I'm fine. I'm 5'11", okay? That would have been pretty mean. So I stick them up on my shoulder, and after a while it gets kind of heavy. You'll realize that one day when you have kids, you can do it for a little bit, but after a while it's like, you start doing this stuff, and it gets old. But I did that for them because I knew something's blocking the view. They're going to miss what they came to see. And the same goes for us. There's sometimes things in our lives that block our view. It's not even that it's that far away. It's not even that it's the issue of being short-sighted or nearsighted, but it's that something's just in the way. It's blocking our view. That's why we can't see the big picture. Jesus mentions this when he's talking about judging others. Sometimes when we look at other people's lives, there's something that's blocking our view, even our ability to evaluate other people's lives. And he puts it this way. Jesus says this in Matthew 7:5. You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Sometimes we look at others and we think, well, oh yeah, man, look, I know what their problem is. I know, man, they should do this and they should do that. But really, Jesus is saying, no, we've got something blocking our ability to actually see clearly. And it's the own stuff in our own life. And it's messing up our vision. It's messing up our ability to see the big picture. And this can be more than just when we're evaluating others. It can be when we're evaluating ourselves. We have stuff that's blocking our ability to see clearly. There's a story in Luke 24. If I had more time, I would elaborate. But let me just narrow down and boil it down to what happens. After Jesus had died on the cross, you'd imagine his followers would be pretty sad. They still didn't quite understand the whole death and resurrection thing, even though Jesus had said it pretty clearly. They didn't really understand what in the world that was about. And so they were pretty sad. There's a lot of disillusionment, sorrow. A lot of people were like, what do we do now? And so after he had died and after he rose and they went to the tomb, there was no body, but they still quite weren't sure what was going on. There's a story in Luke 24 that talks about two disciples that were going on a little journey, about a 7-mile walk to the town of Emmaus. And as they were walking along, it says they were downcast, they were downtrodden, they were sad because of all the things that had taken place. The Bible says that Jesus came up next to them and started walking with them. And you'd think like that would immediately cause them to get excited. Like, Jesus, all right, we don't have to be sad anymore. We don't have to be messed up. We don't have to be so distraught because Jesus is here. But the Bible says that they couldn't even see Jesus. That they were just focused on their sadness. They were focused on their problem. And they had this conversation with Jesus as they walked along this 7-mile journey, but they never recognized it was actually him walking with them. And so they stayed in there. They were telling him, oh man, you didn't hear about this? And Jesus is just kind of playing along in this story. Oh, man, tell me about what's going on with you. Tell me why you're so sad. Tell me. And they're talking, and then they make it to the town. They sit down to eat, and it says when Jesus breaks the bread and prays for it, they realize then, what? This is Jesus. And in that moment, he disappears from their sight. So it took them going on this journey, going through this, and finally getting to a place where they sat down and they took a good look at Jesus. Probably when they're walking along, they're just looking forward or looking down. I don't really know how that all worked out. But when they sat down and they looked at him and they saw him break the bread, I've heard some people say that when they saw he broke the bread, they saw the nail piercings in his hands. Quite possibly, they saw, whoa, this is Jesus. And that's when they saw him. That's when they realized it. And so sometimes what's blocking our view is the problems in our life. We can't get a big picture perspective because we're so focused on our problems. For them it was, this leader, this person we were following is dead. What do we do now? And there's so many different problems and issues that we can face that can block our vision of the big picture. It could be family struggles. Maybe you have a lot of issues in your home. Maybe it's tough living in your house. And sometimes that can be an all-consuming thing that blocks your vision of anything else. It can be issues at school. Maybe it's hard getting the grades that you need. Maybe someone's, I don't know, maybe somebody's getting on your nerves. For my son, bullying exists and annoying exists. He's got this kid in his class that's like getting on his nerves and he can't function because this kid's copying him. Remember back in the day in elementary school, people copy you, and you're like, you just want to punch him in the face, but you can't do that. So, even just the silliest stuff, this was causing him to not function in class because his kid was copying him, and he just couldn't focus on the big picture of learning something because his kid kept copying him, and he was losing his mind, crying and all this stuff. So I had to sit down with him and talk to him about it. But who knows? We got so many different problems from little, something silly like that, to something huge that can take our focus off of anything else, and we just look into that. Maybe it's sickness, or we're stressed out, or maybe it's sin in our life, an addiction, a destructive habit. There's a lot of other things, or even it's things we don't perceive as a problem. Maybe just little obsessions that we have, you ever try to beat a video game? Who's with me? You get into that new video game, you try to beat it, and then all of a sudden you're just gone for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a day, however good you are, But I've been there where you're trying to beat the campaign and you're on that, leave me alone, get out of the way, because I got stuff I'm doing. And so for that, maybe that week of your life, 2 weeks of your life, you have no ability to focus on anything but that video game. And you may think, oh, that's no big deal. That was just 2 weeks. But that was 2 weeks of your life on the video game. It could be, like I mentioned, maybe it's Facebook, Twitter. We're constantly checking our stuff, And so it's taking our attention away from all the other things in our life. And we don't really see it as a problem. It's not an issue. But maybe it is. Maybe it is. Sometimes it's a relationship that we're in that consumes our focus. You get that girlfriend, fellas. You get that boyfriend, ladies. And there's no other options. So, I don't want to... You follow me there? Okay, so that's the only combinations that we approve, all right? So, I mean, you get all that, and all of a sudden people, you lose them. I mean, from a pastor's side, I'm looking, where's so-and-so? Oh, they're dating. Oh, okay. Or maybe you're friends with them. You're like, hey, where's... Yeah, they got a girlfriend, they got a boyfriend. And then they're gone for a while. And then they come back to life, because that consumes everything. And you can laugh about it, but sometimes it just may creep up in your life one day, and before you even notice, you're that person you were laughing about before. I could go on, but let's just continue here with the final thing. Let's just say there could be things blocking our view of the big picture. This happens. It could be you tonight. There's something in your life that's your big focus. It's your thing. It could be a problem, it could be an issue, it could be something you don't perceive to be wrong at all. It may not even be wrong. But it's just something, that's where you put all of your focus, all of your attention, and you can't see the big picture of life, what God is wanting to show you. Finally, this. What can cause us to miss the big picture? Number 3, we're stuck in a rut. We're stuck in a rut. When you're stuck in a rut, it's not that you can't see, but it's that you're not looking. It's not that you can't see, but it's that you're not really looking. The fact is, you're satisfied with the rut. At some level, you're satisfied with where you're going. And this is what a rut would look like. Not necessarily the bicycle one. That looks a little weird. But the car, maybe that was just for the photo. I don't know. But the car one, that's kind of what a rut might look like back in the day. And a rut is, you don't know what that is. We don't have them today. If you get a rut in a road today, they try to repair that in Fairfax County because your car will get all busted up. But back in the day with dirt roads, wherever the wagon, the buggy would travel, wherever the horse and buggy or the car would travel, that's where in the dirt road ruts would develop. And that's where the next car would go because it was easier to go. And that's where the next car after that, and it would go deeper and deeper until that's how the road developed. And being stuck in a rut is not necessarily a bad thing because there's certain ruts, just like the street level view that we talked about. There's certain times where you have to do things. You have to do the school thing. So it seems sometimes like school is such a constant repetitive cycle. You put your alarm, you wake up, you go to school, do your homework, go alarm, and it's like over and over and over. And that's the life you're in. And that's this part of the realities of being a teenager and being in high school. So that some of that you're never going to escape, but if you get so stuck in the ruts of life and that's how you function, sometimes you'll miss the points where you're supposed to turn off. You just keep going down the easy path of the ones that before you have set. You'll miss the turning points. And even some of the ruts can become destructive. The Bible says this in Proverbs 26:11, as a dog returns to its vomit, that's yummy, so a fool repeats his folly. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. Sometimes we get stuck in ruts that become like returning to the same vomit. We go back and back and back to the same stuff, and we may not even realize that's what we're doing. I bet a dog enjoys that. I don't know. I've never seen a dog complain, but they maybe like their vomit. It sounds pretty nasty to me. But sometimes we go back to the same stupid stuff. And let me just wrap this up tonight. As we're talking about ruts and getting stuck in the same patterns, let me ask you this question. Do you know why railroad tracks in the USA are 4 feet and 8.5 inches apart? Anybody know the answer to that? They happen to be 4 feet, 8.5 inches. I don't know if any of you guys would know the answer to that. I didn't know. I was looking on this subject. And it happens to be they're 4 feet, 8.5 inches apart because railroads in the USA were modeled after railroads in England. And in England, they were 4 feet, 8.5 inches apart. And this is what I'm telling you is a little bit of oversimplification, but it's pretty much true, okay? So they use the same tools, the same gauges when they brought the railroad over here. They're like, hey, we got to build a railroad. Great idea. Let's use what they're using. Let's follow them. Let's go after their pattern. and we'll build our railroad. So why are they 4 feet 8.5 inches apart in England? Anybody know? Probably not. They were that size because they used the same carts when they first built the railroad that they used on the roads. So they're like, hey, that's easy. Why don't we just use the carts we already have and modify them and put them on the rail? That way we don't have to do too much work, we don't have to build. So they modeled it after what they already had. They patterned it after that. And now why are the cart sizes 4 feet 8.5 inches? Well, because in England, that's the size of the ruts in many of the country roads. They're 4 feet 8.5 inches apart because if you make the carts any different, the wheels would break, so they just stuck with the ruts that were already there. Now, why were the ruts that size? Well, if you look back, the ruts were that size because in England, you go all the way back to when Rome laid down roads. That was the size of the chariots that went on the roads. So, if you look at the railroad and trace it all the way back to the Roman chariot, it's kind of strange how the ruts you lay down now will affect the future. So think about it. This is the point. The patterns that you're in, the ruts that you're in now, the things that you just do without thinking, while some of them may be helpful, if you don't evaluate them, they're going to set the future of your life. No matter what. They're going to set what other people in the future do, maybe even your children, your grandchildren. And I know we don't think like that sometimes, but that's the truth. What you establish and who you become right now is affecting your destiny. So, as we wrap it up tonight, why do we miss the big picture? The truth is we're all limited in our view. We naturally are nearsighted. And it's easy to let things block our focus. And sometimes we don't even bother to look because we're just traveling along in our little rut and we're happy with what we're doing. And as we continue in this series and as we look at various aspects of our life and what God has for us, I think the big idea would be just to open ourselves up to allowing God's perspective to flood into our hearts and our life. Paul prays this prayer in Ephesians 1:18, and I want to close with this tonight, and we'll be done. He says this, I pray also that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in the saints, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. The fact is, Paul's praying that his listeners, their hearts would open up, the eyes of their heart would see. And that's my prayer for you, that's my prayer for myself, as we venture into 2013. And we won't just go through the same old pattern, see things the same old way, approach life how we always have, look at people the way we always have, just do what we've always done. But that we would earnestly invite God to change our perspective. That we would invite God to give us new eyes to see everything. To see our life, to see how he sees. Let's bow our heads.